every person in business today will have on average, and this is probably rising by the year, 2.2 layoffs in their lifetime. It's strategy, methodology, and then technology. It's so easy for you to say, look, we got this new tool. It's going to take all these videos and it's going to chop them up and give you 30-second clips and you're going to chuck them out into social and we're all going to be rich. But that's starting from the technology first. Buyers now are resonating more with those kind of individual employees and businesses than they do on the corporate accounts.
And there's a real big shift in how businesses are communicating now.
There is a huge opportunity for smaller businesses and startups to really own this space because they can.
Welcome to the What the Fuck Happened podcast. I'm Tom.
And I'm Sam, and we're co-hosts of this podcast.
We talk to leaders in the marketing world and lift the lid on what success truly is.
And it's all about that moment of chaos that breeds success.
With every episode, we'll be speaking to new guests, diving into the what the fuck happened moments that shaped them.
And we're interested in the fine, gritty details. No story is a straight line, no journey is a straight line, and the squiggle is something we're going to ask every guest to draw out at the end.
Sean Broderick, Director of Thought Leadership and Media for Sitecore, also a brand ambassador for the Product Marketing Alliance, or Dublin ambassador for Product Marketing Alliance.
Dublin ambassador, yeah. And I also do a little bit of podcasting myself in my very limited spare time. Product Marketing AI, if you're looking for one.
What the fuck happened there? Let's get straight into it, shall we? Every success story starts with chaos. So I want to jump straight into what is your what the fuck happened moment?
I think like a lot of people in 2025, a lot of their what the fuck happened moments are being laid off. And it's a hard truth of the reality that we're in as marketers right now that it's become ever more prevalent. I was 2:00 on a Friday, had a meeting with my manager about a one-to-one project that I was working on, and got the news that a whole layer of management was getting stripped out of the business. E-commerce company, they were rationalizing the marketing team, and I was affected. Like so many people who are going to be watching this, listening into this podcast, they'll have been in my shoes. My response was, apart from saying what the fuck just happened, was how can I fix this in as short as humanly possible time frame as I can? And at that very point, we were trying to close a house. At home, we were trying to move house. We were trying to get the mortgage over the line. Banks needed like statements of like salaries, and all of this shit was going on in the background. And we got it over the line, and I just went interviewing like there was no tomorrow. This was back in 2022. So the market was probably a little bit better. There was some really good opportunities, and I got a really great role of director of go-to-market at Sitecore. But it was panic stations at that time for me, because, you know, you're used to 2 salaries coming into the house. Next thing it's 1. You're buying a new home. You got to do it up. The place is an absolute wreck. And when I say it was a wreck, I'm not exaggerating. It really was. It was a 95-year-old man's house, and it needed a lot of money, and we didn't have it. and that was the real kind of like wake up moment for me, is in, right, you gotta hitch your wagon to a really great business that has prospects for you. And I think that's how it's evolved for me. Really being able to have opportunities in a larger company to kind of try your hand at launches, product marketing, leaning more into the media side, which I have more of kind of a natural affinity towards anyway. Things that really kind of give you energy, things like this. And that's the essence of it.
How does it feel like talking about that now? Like, was this 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
3 years ago, yeah. It's pretty cathartic, to be honest, because it's always kind of one of those things. On LinkedIn, everyone tries to put the friendly face and the successful face to a marketing career. But every person in business today will have on average, and this is probably rising by the year, 2.2 layoffs in their lifetime. So balance the probabilities is that I'll have another one and probably another one after that down the line. So it's going to happen to all of us at some stage in our career. And to be able to kind of be aware of that, to be able to bounce back from it is super important. And I think for people who've been affected by it, for them to know that it's not the end of the world, it's rough. Like it is rough because you're like, especially in a market like it is today when jobs are harder to get, it's pretty scary and it puts people into kind of panic mode. And that's definitely the mode I went into.
What support did you have in that period when you were sort of looking out for jobs, or did you have, was there any support?
I'm really lucky in that I always say that I'm the second best marketer in my house.
Okay.
I met my wife working for a telecoms company in Ireland about 15 years ago. She's a phenomenal marketer.
Who does she work with? Sorry, what's her role? Who does she work for?
She worked for Square.
Okay, yeah.
And technology, but has kind of spent a career in telecoms, in banking, B2C type companies as well as B2B. And she's a phenomenal sounding board for this kind of stuff. Yeah. And she has a really good, I think, ear and eye for everything that's going on in the space. She knows what's a good opportunity and what's a not really good one. And I think, when you have like someone who's more kind of a classically trained B2C product marketer, here's the insight, here's the campaign, here's the impact. They can almost be a little bit more logical than kind of B2B folks who are, leads. How do we kind of drive more pipeline? Yeah. It's almost like a little bit more tangible because those natural kind of sales cycles are that little bit shorter. So she's been a phenomenal sounding board, for all through my career. And it's good that we're both in the same space so we can kind of understand how these things go.
There's a quote, isn't there, where, or a phrase, I think people just say, there's 3 things that you shouldn't do at the same time. And it's kind of like, change jobs, move house, or have a kid, or get married, or whatever those things or only ever do one at the same time.
At the same time. I did 2.
Yeah, doing 2 is tough. Yeah. I've literally I sat where you were sat with Sam doing this not so long ago, talking about like my what the fuck moment. And it was similar. It was being let go from a job. I think it kind of happens to all of us. But I do think there's a lot of good that comes from that happening, like you said. And it does build a lot of resilience. And I think, as you say, it's rough and it can be horrible. But when you come out the other side, I think that actually gives you like a newfound confidence in yourself, like that you didn't have necessarily beforehand.
But you can be gun shy as well.
Yes.
Because it does knock your confidence.
Yes.
And, rightly or wrongly, you come into a new role, you try and make that impact. But, sometimes you're just if you're trying too hard, it's like, I don't know if anyone watching plays golf, but, if you're trying too hard, it's just not going to work for you. And that can happen when you move into a new role then as well, but I've been lucky in what I've been doing in Sitecore that, been able to kind of get those opportunities. But I do think it allows you to give you the space to say, I'm going to say yes to this. If you get an opportunity, whereas before I'd be like, should I really kind of do this? Do I really have the time? We got talking, you're like, you want to come on this podcast? I was like, yeah, fuck it, go on. That sounds like a blast. I'd love to do that. Yeah. And whereas before you might have said, you know what, I'll be a bit more conservative. I'll get back to the office. I'll do that extra hour this afternoon when I'm in London. Whereas the reality is I'll do that hour, the rest of the week. Yeah. This is an opportunity you mightn't get again.
Something different as well.
And you don't know where it's going to lead to.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's something weird about that comment you've just said, actually. Like, you don't know where it's going to lead to, but I think before I got fired from my first job, I almost that didn't ever occur to me, because it was almost like what I do is so stable, I never need to think about what might happen. And then when you realize that, hang on, the thing that you thought was stable doesn't even pan out how you thought it was going to pan out, I think that opens your eyes to, well, hang on a minute. Yeah. This can work both ways, right? Really interesting. I mean, but your role before Sitecore, the one that you lost, what was that? Can you just jump into that?
Yeah, it was a head of product marketing role. We covered campaigns as well. It was a really fast growing e-commerce company, kind of a classic COVID boom. in e-commerce that, everyone was like, well, nobody's ever going to go to a retail store ever again. And it's going to be online shopping, home shopping forever and a day. It was in the kind of customer support side of it. And it went up and to the right until it didn't.
Yeah.
And, but it was a great learning experience, great business. But it was just, the layers of team that was there, it was just too many. And probably a little bit top heavy, me included. So we kind of, few of us had to kind of move on to different pastures new. But, it was still a hell of an experience because, I always, we'll probably talk a little bit more about this a little bit later, but it's always for me about kind of progress. How are you making progress in your career? A lot of times I've moved for new opportunities. It's been because someone has kind of waved the title at me.
Yeah.
It's like, well, is this progress in your career? Yes.
Yeah.
You should probably give it a go.
Yeah.
And I always try and push myself to that. Getting these opportunities, say yes to them.
Yeah.
Don't hold back from it. You don't know where it's going to lead.
Yeah. I like that a lot. You've been in product marketing for how long now?
Probably about 10 years or thereabouts. In real terms, I spent 4 or 5 years in classic B2C telecoms, marketing, doing product manager work, product marketing style work with propositions and pricing, but all based on, selling more broadband, selling more TV in Ireland. And then I took a trip to the dark side. One of my mentors, Oisin O'Connor, there was a role in product marketing in a telecom software company. So you were basically taking your market knowledge, transposing it into a vendor's mindset. And we kind of really put ourselves in the shoes of the marketer and saying, what kind of propositions will we want to build? What kind of propositions are they building in the Philippines, Singapore, Austria? And how can we use all of that kind of combined knowledge that we have to pitch that to proposition managers and telecoms providers all over the world? And we got a chance to travel a ton. Jordan, Egypt, Singapore, the US, all over Europe multiple times. It was an awesome time, and I loved every minute of it. I was there for 7 years. Really cool.
Pre-COVID, this is?
Well, pre-COVID, yeah. I left there in about 2019.
Okay.
So, that was a really kind of formative part of my career.
Yeah.
And probably an area where I started to kind of lean into presenting to audiences, presenting to these gruff, kind of scary CTOs, CMOs from telecom companies in, back rooms in Cairo, in their headquarters, and having to kind of face those kind of guys down it's pretty character building.
Yeah.
Because you got to go and you got to show up and you've got your hour or two. You might have flown all this way for those couple of hours that you have with them.
Yeah.
You can walk in and they say you've got 20 minutes.
That experience, the traveling element of that role, was that so because you were marketing into those regions as well, or was it just like purely sort of C-suite executive meetings?
It was pretty much opportunity specific. Okay. So we kind of took sales enablement to a new level in that we were trying to help them close deals. So you were so close to the seller. In those type of scenarios, because we're big deals, long sales cycles. So we kind of came in and said, here's the art of the possible. Here's everything you can do with the platform. Here's where we've implemented this with another provider somewhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And we did tours, we did road shows, workshops. Loved every minute of it. Really great business. And I think anytime you get a chance to kind of put yourself in those really, really uncomfortable positions, you're going to get a hell of a lot of growth from that.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I say this honestly, like this is one of the reasons why I really wanted you to kind of come on board. I mean, you have, if you look back at your career, I mean, you've got what, sort of nearly 15 years then or so under your belt of being in marketing, being in product marketing, and being in the various different roles, cross-industry, B2B, B2C, and across the world, right? So, and I guess that's kind of also one of the reasons why you've become a sort of speaker at the Product Marketing Alliance as well, and kind of influential in that space. Before I go into that, where did your passion for product marketing come from? Assuming you're passionate about it.
I am passionate about it. I did talk about like there's that kind of progression. The other aspect of it, and I think people shouldn't be too afraid to kind of say this, is it's progression and it's payment. So are you kind of pushing on in terms of the salary that you're earning month to month? Are you growing in your career? Are you making more money? Like, we live in a really expensive time for anybody who's trying to build a life, build a family, build a home. If you're stagnating in terms of your salary, you're really going to struggle. You're going backwards. And I've always tried to kind of progress my career because I am motivated by money. And I think anybody who really kind of strips it back will admit to the same thing. Yes, kind of day to day, it's your kind of passion that drives you. But really, like, we are motivated by money. We should be, because it's getting harder and harder to kind of build lives, even in really great jobs in like expensive places like London and Dublin and these different types of cities. We have to be upfront about that. So it's progression, it's payment. I've had a real knack, I think, for the cross-functional aspects of the role. So are you building relationships with your sales enablement team, your learning team, your customer success, but really knitting in so tightly with your sales team? I think that, like, product marketing, yes, difficult job, but there's nothing harder than sales. And I've always kind of hung my hat on the fact that I'm a sales-based product marketer. Rightly or wrongly. So, some of the other kind of supporting aspects of the role don't really get me out of the bed in the morning. If someone said to you, well, go and refresh those persona slides, or, some of those kind of more kind of, I would call them edge parts of product marketing, certainly fundamental, certainly important. But really, if you're not helping your sellers go into a customer and sell more software, well, then none of us have a job. So I always bring that bias to any company that I'm in, that you're trying to support the seller. If you're doing some new content or new media, is this growing our audience such that we can sell more stuff? So I do really bring that bias to it. And I think that's where that's why it's been a fit, I guess, for my skills and personality, I suppose.
It's interesting because I do believe, and I don't mean this like completely, but I think it's sort of most people would probably agree with the fact that, sales people are sort of money motivated, money driven.
Maybe that's why I like them so much.
This is what I'm saying. Like, there's a you've just admitted yourself. There's a drive there that is money motivated, money orientated, or at least it comes into the picture. But that is especially important within business. Yeah. From my role at Dojo, we account manage vast number of different customers in the sort of B2B SaaS space. And one of the major things or big flaws we see in quite a lot of these businesses is the lack of communication sometimes between sales and marketing. Some of the successful businesses, I do feel like they have very strong bonds.
Yeah.
I can think of one business who I think I'm allowed to mention because he's the husband of our head of production, but he's head of sales for a company called PVK, who are one of our clients. But another now friend of ours was head of marketing there as well. But they were very tight. They communicated with each other every single day and shared what they were doing because they had one common goal, right? Which was, driving revenue of business and customers and everything else you talked about. But there is definitely a sort of, I can see it in other businesses where those two teams just consider themselves to be separate. There's a sort of some have a healthy amount of competition, others have an unhealthy view of the other. And then it actually almost drives negative competition in a way. It's sort of they're deliberately not helping each other.
Yeah.
You have, though, now moved sort of, not completely moved out of product marketing, but you are now moving further into sort of thought leadership and media. So my next question for you is, I'm interested to know what your take is on B2B and media. I recently had a conversation with Melissa Rosenthal about this and how many B2B SaaS brands are now starting to talk about being media businesses. What's your view on this?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in it because I think the more video media properties that you have out in the space, the greater brand salience that you have. And the reason I think it's so challenging is that when you get to a certain size from an enterprise perspective, is that everything is going through all of your brand functions. Your top and tails have to be perfect. Everything has to be so well edited, well published, on brand at all times, at all stages in the workflow. And I think that is the element that slows larger businesses down. We're trying to avoid that in Sitecore by setting in place the kind of processes that'll allow us to create a lot of this material really, really quickly and get it out the door. But in my experience, it's a challenge to do it at scale. And I see that there is a huge opportunity for smaller businesses and startups to really own this space, because they can get out the door so quickly. They can take the recording, they can render it, they can chop it up 100 different ways using AI tools and automation. Yes, the intros and the outros mightn't be as on brand as you want them to be. The logo might be a little bit off center or off where it needs to be, but it's being done at speed.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the difference, I think, in a lot of these things is like it's almost like the people that win are the ones that stay longest in the space and the ones that stick to the plan when it comes to creating new content. Because it's so hard to be that business who's done 100 episodes of a podcast. There's so few. There's, you know, you'll get to 10 and then the priorities will shift. Somebody will leave in the business. There'll be a priority change. In order to kind of get really, really good at something, either as an individual or a person, you got to really commit to it, and you got to do your 10,000 hours in that space to really get the amount of repetition and hours and content that you need to get really, really good at it. And it's so hard to keep going. And I find this myself, my own podcast. I'm kind of getting close to 20 episodes, but that's over 3 years. Recording episodes at night, editing on the weekends, recording something in December, getting it out the door in March. Those are the things that it's hard to keep these things going and keep the pace on them. That's why I'm so excited about the role at Sitecore, is because we've got a dedicated space now to go and really kind of create this kind of material at scale with our customers, with our partners, with industry leaders, with our prospects even, who are interested in that area. This idea of, you know, James Carberry would be a kind of a real kind of mentor of mine in the space when it comes to podcasts. He's got a company called Sweetfish Media in the US, but he wrote a book called Content-Based Networking. Where it's essentially you're kind of doing a lot of the similar stuff that you're doing here, where you're talking to people who are your prospects. You're getting their insights. You're using those kind of media opportunities to develop relationships and build future pipeline. Those are the kind of things that I think are they're hard to replicate in a world of automation.
I completely agree with that. I actually listened to, not for the first time, it's the second time I listened to this podcast in about 10 days. Alex Hormozy. Do you know Alex?
Yeah.
He was on the podcast.
Acquisition.com.
And he was on with Stephen Bartlett, but very specific segment from their 3.5 hour long podcast. He talks about, he was talking about it from the perspective of an entrepreneur, but I think this can apply to, I would argue what you're talking about, doing podcasts outside of the day job anyway, is kind of, is entrepreneurial. But he was talking about this cycles, this graph he's got written down. And the first thing is you spot an idea or you see someone doing something and you go, they're successful and it looks easy. And he calls that, and then you go, right, I'm going to go and do that. And he calls that the uninformed optimist stage. So, you know, you're super optimistic, you don't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
You start doing it, and a few months in, you start realizing this is actually quite hard. I'm not successful overnight. And then what happens is you become an informed pessimist, right? This was his description. I think it was brilliant. And then he goes, and then stage 3 is what most entrepreneurs get to, and that's all they ever get to. And stage 3 is you're walking around, and then he described the red dress scene from Matrix where Neo and he's following Morpheus and he gets distracted by the red dress, and he's like, you now see another idea or person being successful and it looks easy, and you go, oh, I'm going to do that. Yeah. I'm going to switch because this is too hard. And then he goes, and what happens is you go back to stage 1, and then you go to stage 2, and then you get to stage 3, and you just keep doing this for 20 years. Yeah. And his thing is, but stage 3 is actually stick with it. Stick with it. And then what happens is you then become the informed optimist. You start to see, okay, there are some things here that work. and things that don't work. And once you've got to that stage, now what your focus is on the next stage, which is now going to start doing more of the good and less of the bad.
Exactly.
Then stage 6 is you're successful. But this is the point you're talking about. It's that the hardest bit is that you've got all the excitement, you kick it off, you start, and then it's the repetition of keeping going, doing another one, doing another podcast, knowing that only one person listens to the last one. You know, but it's the same with posting on LinkedIn. I think it's exactly the same. You know, within marketing, you know, you try a new campaign, you put a load of effort in, you put it out into the ether, you don't get the response you want, but you just got to keep doing it, keep going. Not everything is going to work.
You need like almost like a salesperson's ability to face rejection with this stuff as well.
Yeah.
Because if you put all this effort into a new video series and you work with your campaigns teams, your social teams, your creative teams, you're taking their time as well on stuff that they could be working on elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But unless you kind of get it to a point of scale that you can actually say, these are the amount of folks who've listened to it, this is the promotion we've done. Maybe the content is good, but we haven't promoted it. You need to be able to kind of bring those internal stakeholders on the bus with you to know that, okay, well, I'm actually going to spend my time creating landing pages for this new piece of content because we think it's going to drive leads.
Yeah.
And I have to take some of digital delivery's time so they can create the actual landing page and get it out the door so people can actually give us their email addresses and we can start a kind of an informed conversation with those type of people. Again, you're taking pieces out of that bucket internally, and there can be an opportunity cost to that.
Yeah.
But you really have to be so dogged. It's almost like, you know, especially if you're in a new area in a business, you have to look at it almost like your own startup.
Yep.
That you're putting the amount of effort into it you would as if your own kind of livelihood kind of depended on it, or, you know, you remortgaged your house because you've got a new startup idea. You have to kind of almost take that mindset into your day job and really push so hard in a cross-functional way, because that's why I talk about the advantage of the smaller business. Like, in a lot of ways, a 2 or 3 person team with someone who's happy with a fairly, I would say, not a raw around the edges type product,
sure,
can get stuff out the door really, really fast. And then they can tweak it. And then they get to that informed optimist stage because they're like, well, actually, that one was really good. We did something different on that one. And this is the thing that made the difference for us.
But I mean, I guess some of that is, I mean, I agree with you. You know, the smaller businesses that we work with, that tends to be the case. You know, they're able to sort of push a bit further, test the waters. But that being said, equally, I mean, I do actually work with some people who are in bigger organizations where there's just been a significant sort of culture shift, or somebody has come in and gone, do you know what? Like, I'm stripping out this process. You know, I'm bringing you in for your ideas, run with them.
Yeah.
But I think for me, and I've talked about this a lot of what is success? I mean, like, I think you can't just do one thing and expect it to work and it be a success. I think actually you have to fail a lot of times to find that one successful thing. And so I wonder whether or not, and you know, maybe this is a question to you, like in your role with your team, is it not good to sort of create a culture where you want people to try and fail and not to feel bad about that? Like, not deliberately fail, but, you know, evaluate the situation, try something new, fail.
Yeah.
Pick yourself up and do it again, and at some point it will work, versus the sort of just play it safe. Because I feel like safe is just like, at some point, playing it safe is guaranteed to just go into the abyss. Like, there's just so much of everything that is safe that it's not even, it's forgettable, right?
My take is that is great in theory, but in the reality of business, in that, like, people are trying to drive leads, they're trying to drive pipeline, MQLs, top to bottom of funnel, all the way through, it is difficult to get people on the journey with you. And the thing that I've actually learned is, I probably learned the hard way, almost in some way, in some cases, in previous roles, under communicating on what you're working on and how impactful it's being. So when things aren't, you put out the first 2 or 3 and they don't necessarily do the numbers that you thought they were going to do.
Yeah.
It's so hard for you to be able to keep pushing on that lever to say, we need to keep doing more of this. We need 7 more, 8 more, 10 more. But I think the kind of tendency when things are off to a slow start on a given piece of work inside of a business is to under communicate. It's to kind of almost hide where you're at in terms of your progress. The thing that I've kind of learned over time is that kind of relentless communication is so important. One of my old bosses and mentors, Pat Morrissey, used to say, "Some is good, more is better." And I always try and keep that in the back of my mind when you're creating your updates, when you're informing your manager, your CMO, how these things are going, the progress or lack thereof in certain cases in different projects that you're working on. You got to over communicate in those scenarios, especially in something that's new. If you're off to the races, you're into 10, 15, 20 or 30 different pieces of content or interviews or series or podcast. Well, then you've got a nice consistent cadence going and it's doing what you wanted to do, but you've got to over communicate early.
Who are you over communicating to though in this situation? Are you talking about over communicating like to the team in terms of influencing them, motivating them on the vision, or something else?
It's a little bit of that, but what I find is really super interesting is that the external communication channels that you use, we'll say LinkedIn, that's kind of the only real social network that I use, is a more effective internal mode of communication than your own SharePoint or your own kind of homepage or intranet. People skim that stuff. Mm-hmm. I announced a job change this week to my new role in thought leadership and media, and the amount of messages that I got on our internal teams on that, we announced the role internally in January or February, and you get one or two little notes from the people who are your friends in the business.
Yeah.
But I got a message last night from someone in the Middle East saying, we got to set up a studio. I got another one from, he's lining up people for me to interview in Australia. But that's all from LinkedIn. Me communicating it externally on LinkedIn. Yeah. So I think it's crazy how when you kind of really pull back the curtain and kind of show people what you're working on and you put that out there externally, that has the same impact as like a company-wide communication or even like a platform on an all-hands call, for example, where you give an update. On a lot of those calls, people are kind of doing other things. They're maybe, cooking dinner or they're, working on some other piece of their project. Yeah. If it's a late all hands call or whatever, get it out there, get it out in your external channels because those are the things that kind of build momentum. I see that time and time and time again.
That is really interesting. I mean, how do the PR and comms team feel about that sort of change, I guess, in terms of communication? I mean, are they utilizing those platforms more than... I would say they
definitely are, but I think buyers now are resonating with. They resonate almost more with those kind of individual employees and businesses than they do on the corporate accounts. And I think we do a phenomenal job at Sitecore of really pushing great content on our social channels. But a lot of times the engagement levels that you get from some of your key thought leaders in the business are the ones that kind of drive that additional kind of brand salience over and above your existing follower set. So I think it's a combination of everything.
This leads us into the messy middle here, I guess, of the sort of the episode. And on that exact point on thought leadership, we have a number of our customers where we're working with the sort of PR and comms team, and we're often asked to create content that's pushed out, rap videos, updates from the, C-suite, the board, whatever it might be, reviews, reports. There's a very clear, metric that shows without doubt, the company account can post this and then CEO posts. The engagement, the impressions, the feedback from the CEO post versus the company post, they're not even worth comparing. They're just hands down 10 times better. To your point on people are more interested in the individuals. I think this is so interesting in the world of B2B SaaS as well, especially because I think people for so long have just had this view that we're a business and we're selling to a business and we must therefore communicate and talk as a business. And it's just not true. Yeah. At the end of the day, there is a human making the decision within that business. And now that there is more content and so on, I think people are starting to recognize that. And there's a real big shift in how businesses are communicating. Now, the question I wanted to sort of move on to was to kind of get your perspective now on the current state of product marketing. But I think if we lean in a little bit more to your actual newer role as well, which is thought leadership and media, and to the point you've just said there about some of the changes in how businesses do communicate and individuals versus business, I think that would probably be a bit more of a more relevant space. So, I mean, I'll just reiterate that. I mean, what is your perspective on the state of thought leadership, media, and product marketing content? You can lean more into the media and thought leadership. And
for me, it's about drawing a clear distinction on how you tell the story of a buyer versus the type of impact that a business has seen because they've bought your CMS, for example. So you have a CMO who had two websites. One company acquired another. They're merging the two properties into one, and they've got a really clear need that they need a new website. They got to merge a couple of platforms. That's their problem. That's the CMO's problem that they're trying to solve. I think telling that story is a hell of a lot more interesting than we bought your product and we increased our traffic by 30%. The story of how someone gets there and what they did, for me, is so interesting. And that's the bit that we're leaning into this year is, that visionary aspect of the problem that a buyer had. And it's less that kind of classic customer reference, case study, problem solution, result type structure, but more, it's almost like, it's kind of hokey to say it, but it's the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And what journey did they take? What problem were they looking to solve? And how do they kind of go and get it done? That for me is the kind of piece that I'm going to try and lean into this year with the interviews that we're doing with our customers, prospects, partners, etc. Like we say, industry thought leaders. That's where the gold is. And I think when you put that content out there, you can get it in front of the folks who are having similar problems, who are in the middle of an RFP and they've got like 8 different vendors shouting at them, saying broadly the same type of stuff, similar decks, similar capabilities, similar price points. The ones that are kind of, I think, going to really resonate are the ones that tell the story of how somebody overcame something really well. And they're not going to do it by the kind of classic kind of customer reference piece. Because I was at an event today and I was talking to a head of marketing in a legal firm, and he kind of said I'd love to see more of those kind of specific use cases. What did that head of content exactly do? The research is great. We've got all of our research that we're doing. It's really interesting to see it. It's great stuff that you can kind of take a picture of the screen and kind of use it in your own presentations, that type of thing. But really what he wanted to see was, how has someone kind of gone on the journey to kind of get to that point? How have they merged the two websites into a new platform and got everybody on the same page, data architecture wise, everything else to do with it? How do they do their content audits? How do they kind of do all of those different things? And it can be hard to do that because I think in a lot of cases, you're almost putting the onus on the customer to tell that story for you. So you're asking them to do a presentation and say how great our business is. But really, when you kind of sit down with them and you tease it out in a conversation, you're doing the work and you're making it easier for your customer, or in this case, your hero, to kind of tell their story really well. And then it's up to you as a vendor to package it up in the most effective way possible. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the gold you're going to see from kind of B2B providers and SaaS companies this year, and as well as some of the kind of the funkier kind of funny stuff that people are starting to do that we talked about a little bit earlier on as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just sort of thinking in hindsight. I mean, if the business was a person, right, and the only thing they're ever posting is look how good this is, look how good this is, look how good this is, look at this is great, this is the best, this is the best. Like, you're gonna get pretty bored and turned off by that. Yeah. Individual /
that kind
company
of main character energy type things that people are talking about.
If they were an AI face on Instagram, a lot of people would follow them initially, and then you just get sick of it, right? Yeah. Whereas the Because there's nothing to engage with. I mean, this is literally the point of trying to do this. The whole point of this podcast is literally I did X and I'm successful. There's not though. Like, what's the real story like going on underneath here? And it's finding those, like you said, it's not just the problem, but it's just identifying with the emotion of that problem. It's I've had that. Like that's a frustration, or that's what it is. I think it's well, for me, I think at least from a content perspective, the trick is the goal is to identify the problem, sure, but it's to identify the emotions that are caused by the problems. Get people to relate to those emotions. They'll listen to the problems better if they are emotionally engaged.
Yeah,
and then to your point, then how do you package and position your solution?
Exactly. But I think that there's something so interesting there in that, because I've been talking to somebody who we've been trying to get on this new series that we're working on, and they've been quite reticent and cagey to actually do it because they're like, well, listen, we're in the kind of the middle of a restructure right now. We are, we're potentially getting like new leadership. There's going to be a bit of a reorg. So I'm kind of not too keen to kind of get out there. But I was like, this is where the gold is. And it's like, this is the shit that people go through every year. And if you work in marketing, even if it's not even a kind of a layoff scenario, you will see restructures, if not twice per year, definitely once. The structure and makeup of your marketing organization will change based on organizational needs, based on market factors, all that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. The real story is how hard it is going through all of those different restructures in an organization.
Yeah.
How does it impact on how you buy software, how you pay for software, the job that it actually does? And I think that would be, I'm hoping that we can get this person over the line to speak to them about it, because that would be so impactful for so many different CMOs and marketing leaders and heads of content who are experiencing the same issues.
Yeah.
Their remits are changing. Are they going to, is the buying decision going over to the IT side of the house? Mm-hmm. Do they have to work with them to try and get something done in their business? Those are the kind of threads, I think, when you pull, that's what makes a piece of content really, really interesting. And that's what would make it go viral, I guess, in a B2B context and really kind of get a lot more eyeballs on it.
And I think, obviously we're talking about, showcasing challenges from a sort of like, a buying perspective, showcase the challenge your customer went through. But I mean, even you can apply that to you as an individual in your career within marketing as well. Yeah. I think it's the challenges are the things that create value. I think it's the overcoming of challenges. I mentioned to you before we came in here, I was at Web Summit recently. There was another talk. They've got a founders stage there.
Yeah.
Pitching stage even. I can't remember the name of the investment firm that were there, but there was a few different VCs who'd flown over from the US, and one of them were quite a significant VC firm out there. And they were there for 3 hours, and they had different founders and all coming onto the stage and pitching for investment, but live. And I jotted this down as like a key takeaway, but one of the partners was saying most important things that they are looking for when they're assessing founders now in terms of like, do we invest into this business? They're like, look, we've got the pitch deck. Great. Like, we can see the numbers and the idea and what it looks like, but we're also investing into you, the individual. And his takeaway to these couple of the people who went on stage and pitched was like, we need to know more about your story. Like, specifically, you'll be more attractive to us if you can demonstrate and prove that you have been through the ringer and come out the other side.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be business. It can be outside of business. It could be something that's happened in your personal life, but it's we need to know that when shit hits the fan, it gets really fucking tough.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to get through it, because point being, that will happen. Like it's absolutely will happen. It's interesting to just hear that out loud from people that are making those decisions on who to invest in now. I really do think it's sort of valuable. You've mentioned restructuring happening often. Maybe it's going to start happening even more frequently at the moment. Certainly this period we're going through with AI at the moment, it seems that businesses are having to sort of, assess, review, restructure, and do that again, like every 3 months. And technically the pace at which these things are progressing, like you do it daily, but you just can't do it like that, right? But how does this look for you when you look at product marketing or or marketing is it more generally? What's your take on it? I know you have a AI sort of podcast on marketing as well, right? So
that's probably more focused on the tooling side and how people kind of decide as product marketers, how do they pick a win-loss program? How do they pick a competitive intelligence tool? Those type of things. The thing that's really interesting for me and the kind of trend we're seeing is this idea of hybrid teams where you have both human and agents working side by side. And I think that is so much closer than most people realize, where you'll have an org chart where you'll have people who are looking after competitive intelligence. They'll have people who are doing a lot of that reporting, but then you'll have an agent who will almost quasi report into that human based on the updates from competitors that have happened in the industry and the different product changes that they've made. So there's going to be almost like, even from a PR perspective, agents in the background auditing your website constantly to see if it's really hitting what it needs to for a particular buyer or a particular persona. So I think you're going to see quite soon, and this doesn't necessarily mean that a marketing team like this is going to get smaller, but it's definitely going to get faster. So you're almost augmenting your team with additional agents across PR, product marketing, brand marketing, creative execution as well. I think there's a huge opportunity in terms of video repurposing. So, you chop this video up and the AI magic clips give you the kind of top 5 areas or the top 5 30-second clips that can go on social almost ready to go. Those are the type of things I think that it's going to change how marketing works in this year, in 2025. I don't think that's necessarily a future state. This is happening right now. And I think really smart companies are thinking about how they knit together both the kind of agent and the human in those type of marketing structures. I think it's really exciting, but it's also a little bit scary for people as well.
Yeah, of course.
So I would say to anybody, just keep leaning in, keep doing every AI course you possibly can, get yourself onto Zapier, build your own agent, go to make.com, go to Workato and start to play with this stuff. Even if it's only on your own data, if you're on your own Google sheet.
Get a basic level of understanding.
Get a basic level of understanding. So when it comes into your own business and you have to go through the Microsoft world and those integrations that are a little bit more, have to be that little bit tighter, you're bringing a position of knowledge and you're bringing your own knowledge then to how that actually impacts in your own marketing organization.
How will this impact strategy planning? This speed of change? If you've got, you've referenced here, having teams where you've got the sort of your agents, the humans, iterations. I mean, data is being pulled and analyzed in real time across the market. I'm imagining sort of a situation where who goes first? You've all got this information. It's well, if I do that, how do you think that's going to impact strategy? Because how on earth do you plan a campaign, for example, in Q3 later this year when actually you're analyzing Q1 on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, and I think that's always the making sure that you're lining up your campaigns at the different stages of your funnel. So are you kind of filling it? You're filling it at the top, the middle, and the bottom. Are you kind of getting those things done? Because I think what all of this data and all of these agents are actually going to give us is it's going to bring short-termism to a whole new level. And being aware of that and giving things time to work is going to be crucial. And I think it's even going to be even more crucial when we talk about the type of media assets that we're looking to create and that we're creating basically as we speak. If you're looking at that report on an hourly basis and it's feeding you updates to say 10 listens, 20 listens, 100 listens, you're never going to be able to kind of give it that time to see, has it worked?
Who do you think it will favour then? Do you think it might favour those who are more patient?
I think it will. I think it will, but I think it's... I don't necessarily know how it's going to play out, because I always come back to, from a technology perspective, it's strategy, methodology, and then technology. It's kind of rooted in kind of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits and all this type of stuff. But in terms of how you actually implement software, Right now, it's so easy. And I've talking about it just moments ago about agents. It's so easy for you to say, look, we got this new tool. Look at this. Look at what it's going to do. It's going to take all these videos and it's going to chop them up and give you 30-second clips, and you're going to chuck them out into social, and we're all going to be rich. But that's starting from the technology first.
Yeah.
And I think when you have your strategy, your methodology of how you're actually going to use it, and the piece of tech is at the very end, those are the people who are going to have success.
So really, a really valuable point. That
I think
strategy,
so.
methodology,
technology,
SMT,
in that order.
Yeah,
In that
I
order.
really like that. You wear many hats.
Mm.
And you can tell me a little bit more about some of the other hats, because obviously there's Sitecore, you have the podcast, you're also the ambassador, you're doing sort of regular sort of speaking bits for the sort of Product Marketing Alliance, and presumably doing other things. How do you manage it all?
Poorly. in short, I would say at the same time I compartmentalize stuff reasonably well. I would say, I'm one other thing which I do, which I actually love, and I do want to give a shout out to, is I'm on the board of the Esophageal Cancer Fund in Ireland. Small charity, does about 500,000 euros in donations every year. Just last week we had our biggest collection event of the year called Lollipop Day. And I would say, looking at these things in pots of time is kind of how I do it. So, we will meet probably once every 6 or 8 weeks or so as a board. We'll have larger activations like the Lollipop Day itself. We did a collection with a group of my colleagues as well, which was amazing, from my own workplace at Sitecore. But looking at those things as points in time. So really kind of looking at the patient support days, how you actually support the campaign, how you actually get out there on the street and shake some buckets and get some tap notifications, but then putting it to side and knowing that, okay, we're meeting at the end of March. We'll get ready for that. We'll be ready to go, but you're not doing it on a kind of a consistent kind of day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And I would do the same with the podcast.
Yeah.
I've got I'm no angel in this regard whatsoever. I've got 2 episodes that I need to edit and publish that I should have done 3 or 4 weeks ago, but I'm behind. And that's just life. So and I think when you've got a bit of travel, you've got a really busy new job that you're trying to implement stuff in, you do have, some things have to give.
Sure.
Things like the kind of external podcasts for my own self, that's the one that probably does get pushed out the door as much as you can. And but I think having those kind of pots of time and but giving yourself space as well to outside of your day job to try and grow your skills, because for me it's about skill acquisition. Are you good at presenting at events? Can you think of a topic and create a story that is going to resonate with people? I did one about careers in product marketing at the PMA Summit in London. I think it was pretty well received, but the kind of process of thinking about how you kind of map out how you chart the course from a product marketer all the way to a CMO or the C-level, but one tends to feed the other. So for example, in that talk, that was all based on 6 different conversations that I'd had with product marketers who had subsequently gotten to CMO, gotten to CPO on the podcast. So that's your baseline raw material. And I think you get kind of consistent long-term benefits of that. And I think when you take that internally and you start to do multiple series of these type of interviews, then you can start to look back and say, how can we create this into a white paper? How can we take these insights and collate the ones from the 5 or 6 different interviews and say, wow, now we've got like a really nice thought leadership piece for professional services, for retail, for hospitality, for healthcare. And I think when people kind of stick to these long form video, media, podcast style assets, they're just a gift to keep on giving. And I think as well, when it comes to what's automatable in the marketing space, blogs, social copy, those type of content are the things that is going to become homogenized very, very quickly. But you're seeing it right now on your LinkedIn feed. Every second thing that you're pushed to on your mobile is a video. Because it's the one thing that you can know for sure, unless you're using Synthesia, that is
Another AI tool.
Another AI tool that's not automatable. It's real. It's telling a story.
Yeah.
And I do think that is a tremendous hedge when it comes to how AI is going to evolve and our interactions with it. Are you really focusing on the things that are going to give you a unique competitive advantage?
Yeah.
Because the unique bit is, it's difficult to pull off. It's hard. You got to bring a lot of people together to get it done.
Yeah.
But unless you're doing that really kind of difficult work at the start, you're not going to have a unique asset at the end, which to have some kind of differentiation.
One thing I picked up on there that you just said, you were sort of saying that, one thing almost leads to the other though, right? So within your journey of getting to this stage of having these different hats and different roles that you're playing out, I could guess, I think, in which order they would come. But I just want to ask you first, like, which came, in what order did this happen for you? You've got the podcast, the speaking, you're talking about the white papers,
Yeah, the podcast probably started in about 2021. It was a classic COVID project.
Yeah.
So, I was one of the only white dudes with a podcast, which was unique of me, obviously not. But I'm probably one of the only ones that are actually still doing it.
Stuck to it, yeah.
And stuck to it. But quite intermittently. You're probably talking 5 or 6 episodes per year at most. So you're not talking an enormous outlay, but you're still the podcast guy.
Yeah,
People still associate you with it, and also you kind of get opportunities to host panels and different things because you're actually doing that, not because you've had 100,000 downloads or people thought it was the greatest podcast on product marketing ever made. It's not, but it's quite good. It's short form and people like it, but it gives you opportunities. And the one I think that has cropped up for me, which has kind of been totally transformative for my career, is we did our big show every year is Symposium at Sitecore, and we had a live stream of the main stage, but we set up with one of our partners a pre and post show live stream. And because I do podcasts and host events, I was asked to present on it. So I basically got to cosplay as a TV presenter for 3 days. And it was the greatest thing that I've ever done professionally. Yeah. The feedback was phenomenal because what someone asked me is like, did you enjoy it or did it feel like pressure? And I was like, no, it beats working. It actually did not feel like I was working.
Yeah.
Didn't feel like
nice
it.
Feeling.
Yeah. And it didn't feel like, when we were in Nashville and we went to the bars at night, and I was jumping in a cab at 10 p.m. when the party was just getting started, quite literally, because you got to be downstairs for hair and makeup at 7:15 the next morning. It didn't matter.
Yeah,
because you were excited. You could not wait to get into it. Like, how often do you come in the next morning where you're like, oh, I can't wait to write this brief.
Yeah.
Or I can't wait to kind of create this piece of content.
Yeah.
In those scenarios, you got to do something really unique and really cool.
Yeah.
Those opportunities don't come unless you're kind of saying yes to a lot of stuff.
I think there's a lot of people on LinkedIn who are in senior roles and successful who can give quite a strong impression on younger people or people just starting out on something new that it's so difficult. It's almost like it's not, you shouldn't bother trying vibe. Like, I've got no issue with people saying you're going to have to work hard, but I think sometimes advice is so strong that it can kind of put a lot of people off. Because it's like, well, I can't risk what I'm doing because it's clearly going to fail.
Yeah.
I really feel like I try to paint the sort of picture that it's not that hard. It's hard, but equally it's just take the first step.
Yeah.
I think if you and your story, I think really, like for me at least, kind of amplifies that because you didn't decide on one day, what I want to do is be a speaker. I want to be in this new role. I want to be going to panels. I want to be in Nashville, and I want to be doing these other and running and having 20 podcasts episodes out. It's you start with one thing leads to the next thing of that, which leads to that. What you have done is been consistent. Yeah. I'm not taking away from the fact that you have said yes to lots of these things, but I think I do think it's sort of important for people to kind of not overwhelm themselves with the end result. I had this conversation with a few people who advise on sort of personal branding on LinkedIn as well. It can be very hard to sort of know, well, what do I post first? Who's going to listen? I don't have a community. Like, you can get so bogged down in that stuff, but you have to just start. And starting doesn't need to be as hard as delivering all of that at the end. But I think starting is the hardest thing, making the first step, but then being consistent and saying yes will lead you to the opportunities, or at least it sounds like for you.
No, you got to begin.
Looking at your career, you've had plenty of wins, but what's been your biggest failure?
The biggest failure I would say that I had was we did a price increase one time at a telecoms operator that I was working with, and it was a blanket price increase to get us to a sufficient margin level on the different countries and different services that we provided. And we put that in place. So it was a price increase across the board. And it'd say it went from one rate was a particular service, and it was maybe a €2 per minute. And we put it up to €3 such that we were hitting a sufficient margin. Because the book said that this was our cost and this is how much we charge for it, i.e. there gives our margin. But I either didn't check or didn't do the due diligence with our business account team to make sure that what it said on the book was actually what we were paying. And it turned out that one of the businesses that we put the prices up on were actually giving us a sweetheart deal on the wholesale rates. And when that price increase went out, it made it look like that theirs was the most expensive provider of that service in the market. And it was an absolute shit show to try and roll it back. We had to do so many circulars, so many direct mails, so many physical pieces of promotion for them to try and work that back. We had to send out a comms to say we'd made a mistake on the headline rate. We had to bring that back. At that given time, there was also, that provider were taking a space in our office. They wanted to pull out of that sublet.
Right, okay.
It went all the way to the CEO, and I was probably like 3 or 4 years into my career at this point.
Yeah.
And it was
was this decision like on you, or you were part of the decision? You're in the team?
We were basically making the pricing changes, and it was a kind of a classic. Here's our margin. The wholesale rate to Vanuatu in Australia has gone up. So we got to maintain our margin of whatever the rate was at the time. I can't even remember. But it was just such a lesson that you really have to just go that extra mile in terms of cross-functional engagement.
Yeah.
Drop down to the first floor, go and see the business team and make sure that you don't have a sweetheart deal with a provider of whatever service it was.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was just like...
Good learning lesson.
Yeah, it was just to make sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, especially with things like that. Because, for us, from a kind of a headline perspective, it looked like we were standardizing these rates across their competitors. But in reality, we could have given it for almost half price because they were giving us a super rate on it. And
easy to do, but severe consequences.
Severe consequences, yeah. And it was so hard to roll it back. And then, the more you offered, then they were like, the damage is done.
Yeah.
The damage is done.
Do you watch the US Office? Sorry, I'm interjecting.
I don't.
Have you seen the UK Office?
Yes.
Right. Well, the US Office is, it's the same, but the US. But anyway, I literally watch it religiously all the time because I find it hilarious. There's a whole episode in there in the US version where quality control officer gets a bit like can't be bothered to check the quality control weekly. They print a batch of paper that's got like a phallus watermark on the paper. It gets distributed to loads of people. Then they have things going to the warehouse. The phones are off the hook. Everyone's doing customer service. They had people. It's exactly this. And you can imagine if you've seen the UK Office the chaos of that page. But anyway, when you were talking about it, I'm just imagining that it's like, whoa, this one what seemingly was like just a pretty standard, simple thing to do has gone out of control. Those
kind of shit shows that where you really feel like you're awake at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're not getting back to sleep, you're just going straight into the office at 7, trying to rectify this. It's a good story. It's hell. It is. I was hell at the time. It really was hell, but it was a great learning experience.
We've talked a lot about change, changes in structure, change in your role, change in focus and trends. What's the thing that sort of most frustrates you about marketing today? And do you see anything that maybe like people could lean into more to sort of avoid that?
I would say it's getting stuff out the door. I think
Speed of like decision making.
Speed of decision making, and a colleague of mine, Jacqueline, always says like approvals is where great content goes to die.
Oh yeah, we have this with the bigger clients that we work with. It gets sent 8, 9, 10 rounds of changes, and what starts out is we're going to do it creative, new approach this time. It just gets killed back to what it was originally.
Exactly, and I think it's that approvals for, and I think where you have a culture that you can make a mistake and you can fail, it's better to get those things out the door and have to tweet them after the fact.
Apologize afterwards.
And apologize after.
Beg for forgiveness, whatever the phrase is.
Yeah. And
but you've said this earlier, obviously, about that belief that the smaller teams perhaps have it easier. You're at Sitecore and you're literally having this conversation now. There'll be other marketing people I know who will hopefully listen to this and be thinking, but how do I like change this process? Like, what can you do? What's your advice to sort of senior marketing leaders right now in terms of how to quicken that up? Because presumably you're having to speak to other senior stakeholders and tell them that their opinion is not needed or something.
and I think in most cases it's executive sponsorship. And I think with a lot of these programs, we have customer advisory boards and, partner leadership boards where you have leadership buy-in, and we have a CMO that creates a great culture for us. Like, she's so super detailed oriented, but is also willing to kind of give us the space to say, get this out the door. If it's a mistake, we can fix it. Yeah. So when you're able to kind of get stuff out the door and fail fast, tweak and go again, those are the kind of things you're after. Because if you have an organization that is culturally 80% that way, but you have someone who's not enabling that type of behavior at the senior level, then you're going to struggle. So I think in a lot of these type of larger programs, you need an executive sponsor to really be pushing hard. Yeah, that speed is key. And I do really think in this day and age, speed kills. In a good way. The faster you can get stuff moving, the better you'll be, because those blemishes, yes, they can be blemishes, but you need to get it out there and see what's working. Yeah. If you don't get it out there, nobody sees it.
Well, I mean, I get it. I think it's another phrase I've really picked up that you've said there. I love it. The fail fast, get up, tweak, go again. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. There's so many ideas that get equally. I think there are some businesses out there who are killing it in terms of doing that and executing it. Well, yeah, for me, I really don't like betting firms and advertising, but they are quick. A lot of betting firms, like spotting something that's happening and the following day there's an advert out and it's like on that moment. And I think Ryan Reynolds has actually got that advertising company and talks about they've almost got like ready-made content structures that are ready to just embed what a viral moment that's happening today, stick it into that structure and release it within 24 hours. It's definitely, I agree with you there.
I think it's interesting though. It's different type of content, but I would have to say that TikTok, the small business TikTok account for UK and Ireland does a really, really good job. And the reason I like it is because they film those things in the Dublin office and you hear lots of Irish accents, which is obviously nice for me, being an Irish person, but someone will roll up to them with a camera, they'll take a little mic and they'll give you some tips on how to use TikTok for small businesses. Yeah. And it's super actionable. Yeah. And you get served it, you watch it, you enjoy it, and you're like, well, if I was a small business owner, I'd probably be using it in this way as well. Yeah. And I love that, the fact that like you can have a business that's as large as TikTok that's doing this like reasonably low fidelity type videos and getting them out the door quick. Yeah. I love that structure and approach. And then you have the opposite side of the coin is, you have somewhere like Shopify, which for me, from a product marketing perspective, is like they have an enormous product marketing organization. But I just think when it comes to their updates, their kind of quarterly updates, they do a phenomenal job in terms of creative execution. Yeah. And they did their most recent one was like, they called it the boring update, where they had 150 different smaller tweaks that were going to make your life easier, but they created a boring TV channel So when you clicked on each one, there was like a channel that spoke to, it was like a TV advertisement that spoke to one of the new features that they had. It was like acted out, almost like an old style. And it was just so super creative.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is the kind of the boring kind of functional release, but this is all the stuff that we're giving you. So they take it that it's not the blockbuster thing that everybody wants, the kind of big launch in lights. They took it, really nice creative execution, and just ran with it. I'm not sure how impactful it was or how much people enjoyed it, but I remembered it. And I thought it was super cool. So those guys are killing it.
Nice. I'm conscious of time. We've got a few rapid quick fire questions to sort of finish on, which you've actually already seen. I kept these from everybody else. So you've kind of got an advantage. So, but let's just finish up on some of these. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Stand up, speak up, and shut up. So it was something my uncle said at a wedding speech. And that was the advice that someone had given him for the wedding speech was, get up there, make sure people can hear you, and don't overstay your welcome. And I think I always say, like, my tagline I put on my LinkedIn is like, dynamic marketeer with a flair for brevity, full stop. So know when to step off, know when you've said enough, and move on. I love that type of brevity focus. So stand up, speak up, and shut up.
I love that, and I'm still working on my brevity. Can
I throw one thing in? Amy Keane, who's like everyone in the marketing team in Sitecore is fanboy and fangirl over her, but she's has a public speaking consultancy called The Good Shout.
Okay.
And we did her training before Christmas, and she always talks about the dismount. How do you dismount out of a conversation? How do you stop? So impactful. Recommend to everyone.
Okay.
What's
her name? Amy Keane.
Amy Keane.
The Good Shout.
Kean. The Good Shout.
Okay, I'll have a look at that.
Yeah,
it's definitely something I'm interested in.
Phenomenal.
I'm constantly looking at my Sybil AI from sales calls and trying to reduce the percentage of talk time. It's a goal. It's a challenge as well. If you could go back to your biggest what the fuck moment, what would you say to yourself?
I'd say don't panic, because I panicked. Yeah, I probably didn't. I probably say I tried to fix it as soon as humanly possible. If I could have gotten a job on the Saturday after the Friday, and if I had to do 10 interviews on the Saturday morning, I would have done it. So I would say take your time, pick the right opportunity for you. I got the right opportunity, and I was able to, I think I took 2 months off before I started the new role because we were literally renovating our house. So I would say don't panic, take your time, pick the right opportunity, and know why you want to work there is key. Even in a tough job market, sometimes you got to take a job because you need a job. And I've got no problem with that as well. But don't panic.
It's good advice. Final quick fire question. Finish this sentence. Success is
health, family, work, in that order.
Health, family, work. Can't really disagree with that. Nice. I've got one more final thing. Don't think it's on there. You don't have to do this. We've got a... it's not on there. Part of the Dojo Films logo, and there's a squiggle.
Yeah.
The squiggle represents the fact that no journey is a straight line. Mm-hmm. No project that we do is a straight line. There's no exact process that we replicate for every customer. It's a squiggle. So far, what we've been doing is asking each guest to sit and close their eyes, but you don't have to close your eyes, and you don't have to do this. But we've been asking guests to sit there, close their eyes, and going from left to right. If you could draw out your journey, and you can start it from when you were born or from whatever, leaving school to now, maybe your professional career, I think is what we've done on others, and draw out a map of your journey with up and down representing peaks and troughs, successes and failures. Would you be willing to do that?
Yes.
Perfect. So I think is that camera on? I think that camera's on you.
Yeah.
So if you want to, just look, I guess, close your eyes, but face that camera and then going left to right, just draw out your journey. Nice. Was that a little
We're on the
upward trajectory at the end there?
We're on the uptick.
Nice. But definitely, clearly a couple of big moments.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of peaks and valleys. That is for sure.
But the point being, I think, as yet, nobody has proven that there is anything or any truth in success.
Up and to the right.
No one has been in here yet going, well, I just had this idea. And
yeah. Easy.
Sean, it's been really great having you on here. Really appreciate you taking the time, flying over from Dublin. I know this wasn't the only thing you were doing in London, but I really appreciate you coming out here and talking with us.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to the What the Fuck Happened podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to listen to more, subscribe to our channel. We look forward to seeing you the next one. What the fuck happened there?